I was not kicked out of the wedding. I was erased from my son's life with one text message. I did not argue or beg. I simply locked everything down. Like a woman who has lived long enough to know money is always the final excuse. When they appeared at my door the next morning with plastic smiles and a demand, I understood everything. This was not love. It was a business transaction. My name is Evelyn Carver. I am 57 years old, for 30 years. I worked as an internal financial controller at Northbridge Compliance Group in the suburbs of Milwaukee. My job was to find the discrepancies in the ledgers that everyone else missed. I learned early on that a missing cent is never just an accident. It is always a symptom of a larger rot. I applied that same precision to raising my son. After my husband died on a patch of black ice on I-43, Logan became the only asset I refused to risk. I raised him with discipline and kindness. For more than 2 decades, he was the boy who held doors open for strangers and called his mother every single Sunday at 6 in the evening. He was a good man. He was my son. Then he met Brielle Hart. She entered our lives like a beautifully packaged product that fails the stress test. She was immaculate. She wore tailored blazers and spoke in a soft, modulated voice that sounded expensive. She laughed at the right moments, but her eyes remained as cold and flat as a frozen lake. The first time we had dinner together, I asked Logan about his new project at the architecture firm. "It's going well," Logan started, reaching for his water glass. "I think the senior partners are—" Actually, Brielle cut in, placing her hand over his. Her fingers were manicured, sharp. "Logan feels undervalued there. We are discussing him branching out. He needs to realize his worth outside of that corporate structure." Logan stopped talking. He looked at her hand on his arm, then down at his plate. "Yeah," he mumbled. "My worth." That was the beginning. Over the next few months, my son ceased to be Logan. He became a mouthpiece for a vocabulary I did not recognize. He sat on my sofa, refusing the coffee I brewed, and told me, "Mom, I need to set strict boundaries. Your financial input it's stifling. I need total independence to heal from our toxic dynamic." "Toxic?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Logan, I paid off your student loans last year. Is that the toxicity you mean?" "That is exactly it," Brielle answered for him, her smile tight. "Financial dependence is a form of control. Evelyn, we are cutting those cords." The engagement came 3 months later. I heard about it through a third cousin who saw a photo on social media. I waited for a call. None came. Instead, I received a text message from Logan's phone 3 weeks ago. "Small ceremony. Do not interfere." It was efficient. It was brutal. But I was a mother, and mothers are conditioned to forgive the unforgivable. I convinced myself it was pre-wedding jitters. I convinced myself that if we sat down, just the 3 of us, we could fix the ledger. Last night, I stood in my kitchen folding the linen napkins I had used for every major holiday since Logan was born. I smoothed the fabric with my hands, imagining a dinner where the air was not thick with tension. The phone buzzed on the counter. It sounded loud in the empty house. I picked it up. The message was from Logan. "Do not come to the wedding. Brielle does not want to see you." I stared at the screen. I typed, "Logan, please." The message failed to send. The icon turned red. He had blocked me. I stood there in the silence of my kitchen, the linen napkin still warm under my hand. I did not cry. I did not throw the phone. I simply set it down. The time for emotion had passed. The time for auditing had begun. I did not cry immediately. I sat in the wooden chair, my spine pressing against the hard slats. I read the message again and again. Brielle does not want to see you. The words stopped looking like language and started to feel like the screech of metal on metal. It was a mechanical noise inside my skull. I called him. It went to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a message asking for a reason. It was marked delivered. Then nothing. The silence had a texture. It was heavy and suffocating, exactly like the air in the funeral home waiting room 20 years ago. Right after the police officer handed me a bag of my husband's personal effects. The world keeps spinning, but you are stuck in a vacuum. I put the phone down. Begging does not work on people who have decided you are the enemy. I stood up and walked to the study. I unlocked the fireproof filing cabinet. I needed to see the numbers. Numbers do not lie. Numbers do not block you. I pulled the files. The joint checking account we used for his tuition. The emergency savings fund established on his 18th birthday. The trust fund left by his father, which I still managed as the trustee until Logan turned 30. That was 60 months away. I scanned the latest printed statement for the joint checking account. My finger traced the header. I stopped. The mailing address was wrong. It was no longer his apartment in Milwaukee. It was a post office box in downtown Chicago. He had never mentioned a post office box. He had never mentioned Chicago. My chest tightened, but my hands remained steady. I picked up the landline and dialed a direct number. "Sarah," I said, when the voice on the other end answered. Sarah was a branch manager I had known since we were tellers in our 20s. I need to ask a hypothetical question about joint access rights. "Evelyn. Is everything okay? If I am the primary account holder," I said, my voice flat. "And I suspect the secondary holder is compromised. Who can step into my house while I am sleeping?" "Technically, either party can withdraw the full amount," Sarah said, her tone shifting to professional caution. "But as primary, you can close it? Or freeze it?" "Thank you." I hung up. I did not freeze the accounts. Freezing them signals a dispute. Instead, I logged into the online banking portal. I transferred every cent from the joint checking and the emergency savings into my personal solo account. I left the joint balance at 0. This was not revenge. You do not take revenge on your child. This was triage. I was cutting the pipe to see who was thirsty. 3 hours later, at 9 in the evening, my phone pinged. It was an automated security alert from the bank. Multiple failed login attempts detected. I opened the details. The attempts were coming from an IP address associated with a luxury residential complex in Chicago, the same city as the post office box. They were trying to get in. And they were trying to get in on the very night I was told I was unwanted. I called the fraud line. "I see the attempts." "Mrs. Carver," the operator said. "Do you want to authorize the device?" "No," I said. "Flag it. Flag any transaction that does not originate from my known devices. Someone is trying to access funds that are no longer there." I hung up and sat in the dark kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I pulled a notepad from the drawer. I clicked my pen. I wrote a header, "The Silent Plan." Underneath, I wrote 3 words: protection, evidence, timing. I sat in the blue glow of my laptop screen, scrolling through Brielle's life. It was a curated gallery of expensive tastes. There were photos of limited edition handbags, sunsets from resorts in Cabo, and dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants. Yet, nowhere in the hundreds of posts was there any evidence of actual work. Her bio simply read, Brand Consultant, a title that usually means unemployed with a credit card. I looked for clients, for projects, for an office. There was nothing, just a seamless stream of consumption. I scrolled back 3 years. It took time, but I have patience. I found a photo of her on a yacht, her arm draped around a man who was definitely not my son. He was older, tan, with silver hair. I recognized him instantly, Grant Holloway. His face had been plastered all over the local business section 2 years ago during a high-profile real estate collapse. I opened a second tab and searched for the court filings regarding Holloway's bankruptcy. He filed for Chapter 11 protection on the 4th of May. I switched back to Brielle's timeline. The last photo with Grant was posted on the 2nd of May. Then there was silence for exactly 2 weeks. On the 18th of May, my son's face appeared on her feed for the first time. The caption was 2 words, new chapter. She had not mourned the end of a relationship. She had simply migrated to a fresh host. I did not sleep. At 8 in the morning, I called Martin Klein. Martin has been my family attorney since Logan was in diapers. He is a man who believes in contracts more than he believes in God. I need an appointment. Martin, I said. Today? Evelyn. My calendar is, this is about the trust. I interrupted. I need to ensure that no matter what happens, the principal cannot be touched by a spouse. Not now. Not ever. Martin paused. I will move some things around. Come in at 11. In his office, surrounded by walls of mahogany and the smell of old paper. Martin laid it out. We can tighten the disbursement conditions. Evelyn. We can add a clause that keeps the funds as separate property, strictly for Logan's health and welfare. If it is structured correctly, it never commingles with marital assets. Even if he marries her, she cannot claim a dime of the corpus in a divorce. Do it, I said. Lock it down so tight that even I cannot open it without a court order. Leaving Martin's office, I made one more call. Dana Whitaker used to investigate insurance fraud before she went private. She was expensive, but she was thorough. We met in a diner near the highway. Dana looked like a librarian, small and unassuming, but her eyes were sharp enough to cut glass. I need a background check, I told her, sliding a folder across the table. Brielle Hart. Financial history, previous addresses, civil suits, dig deep. Dana opened the folder and glanced at the photo. The fiancé. The investment manager, I corrected. Dana nodded slowly. I charge $200 an hour plus expenses. I need 72 hours. She looked up at me. I have to warn you, Evelyn, you are not going to like what I find. Mothers never do. I do not need to like it. I said. I just need it to be true. I drove home feeling a strange sense of calm. Action is always better than paralysis. When I walked into my kitchen, my phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from an address I did not recognize, a string of random letters and numbers at a free email provider. I opened it. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained a single line of text. Mother should play her role. There was no signature, but the tone was unmistakable. It was the same condescending sweetness Brielle used when she tried to explain to me why my son was too busy to visit. She was watching me. She knew I was moving pieces on the board, even if she did not know exactly which ones. I did not reply. I did not delete it. I printed the email on a crisp sheet of paper. I punched holes in the side and placed it into a new binder I had labelled evidence. It was the first thorn I preserved, but I knew it would not be the last. Dana sat at my dining room table, the mahogany surface covered in photocopies and printouts. She did not drink the coffee I had poured. She simply laid out the facts, like a coroner laying out instruments. The total credit card debt is $61,842, Dana said, tapping a spreadsheet with a manicured fingernail. Most of it is in collections. She has charge-offs from 3 major banks. I looked at the numbers. They were not just figures. They were a history of impulse and irresponsibility. But Dana was not finished. She slid another document across the table. It was a court filing from St. Louis. She was sued for unpaid rent and damages. Dana explained. She skipped town before the judgment was entered. That was 5 months before she met Logan. My stomach turned, but I kept my face impassive. 5 months. Just enough time to reinvent herself, find a new target, and smile her way into my son's life. There is more. Evelyn. Dana's voice dropped an octave. She pulled out a loan application form. It was filled out in blue ink. This was submitted to a private lending group last week. It is a request for a personal loan of $45,000. I read the name at the top, Logan Carver. He never told me he needed money. I said, "Look at the contact email." Dana said. I looked. It was not Logan's email. It was B. Hart Consulting, the same address Brielle used for her non-existent business. I looked at the contact phone number. It was hers. And look at the signature, Dana added, placing a copy of Logan's employment contract next to the loan application. The signature on the contract was Logan's tight, angular, the L looping distinctively. The signature on the loan application was rounder, softer. It was a forgery? It was a good one. But to a mother who had signed permission slips and birthday cards for 26 years, it was obviously fake. She is applying for credit in his name, I said. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. And she is routing the communications to herself so he never sees the approval or the rejection. There is one last thing, Dana said. She opened the final folder. For a 6-month period 3 years ago, she didn't use the name Hart. She worked under the name Brielle Mercer. It looks like she changed it temporarily to avoid wage garnishment from a previous employer. I sat back in my chair. The room felt very cold. I had thought this was a battle of personalities. I had thought she was just a possessive, insecure woman who wanted my son to herself. I was wrong. This was not a domestic dispute. This was a financial extraction model. My son was not a husband to her. He was a host organism. We need to tell him, I said. He won't believe you. Dana warned. She has insulated him. I have to try. That afternoon, I drafted a letter with Martin. It was a formal request for a private meeting to discuss urgent estate matters. Sent via certified mail with a return receipt requested. We addressed it strictly to Logan Carver. It was a legal move to preserve evidence, to show that I had attempted to warn him. 2 days later, the return receipt arrived in my mailbox. I stared at the small green card. The signature in the received by box was not Logan's. It was hers. Brielle Hart. She had signed it with a flourish, the ink dark and heavy. She was intercepting his certified mail. She was not just screening his calls, she was filtering his reality. That night, I drove to the local police precinct. I did not ask for an arrest. I knew I did not have enough for that yet, not without Logan's cooperation. I asked to speak to the fraud desk. I want to file an informational report regarding potential identity theft and elder financial abuse. I told the officer on duty. Has money been taken from you? Ma'am, he asked, looking tired. Not yet, I said, placing the copy of the forged loan application on the counter. But the mechanism is in place. I am creating a paper trail. When the collapse happens, I want the date of this report to be on the record. I walked out into the cool night air. I had started the clock. Now, I just had to wait for them to make a mistake. And people who are greedy always make mistakes. It was raining when they arrived. A cold, grey drizzle that turned the morning into twilight. They did not knock like family. They stood on my porch like debt collectors waiting for a signature. When I opened the door, the air between us was so tight it felt combustible. Brielle spoke first. She always spoke first. We need to settle this. Evelyn, she said. Her voice was calm, but it had the hard edge of a command. Logan stood half a step behind her. His shoulders were hunched, his posture collapsing inward as if he were trying to occupy less space. Brielle's hand was clamped onto his forearm. It looked like affection to a stranger, but from where I stood, it looked like a leash. Her fingers were digging into his sleeve. I stepped back to let them in. But I did not offer coffee. I did not offer seats. We stood in the foyer. You are interfering, Brielle stated, smoothing her wet coat but not taking it off. You are fabricating stories to drive a wedge between us because you cannot handle Logan's independence. It is pathetic. Really? I secured my own money, I said, looking only at Logan. That is not interference. That is prudence. Brielle stepped forward, blocking my line of sight to my son. You cut off the joint accounts. You flagged the cards. We have deposits to make. The venue requires a transfer by noon. You need to unlock those funds and authorize the transfer. Consider it your contribution to our future. She called it a contribution. I called it a ransom. I ignored her. I shifted my position so I was facing Logan directly. He looked exhausted. There were dark circles under his eyes, and he was staring at the floorboard near my boots. Logan, I said. My voice was quiet. Do you know about the $45,000 loan application? Logan's head snapped up. His eyes went wide, darting from me to Brielle. He looked like a man who had just heard his name called over a police scanner. What? What loan? He stammered. I didn't apply for. I don't need a loan. There was a misunderstanding with the paperwork, Brielle cut in, her voice rising sharply. She tightened her grip on his arm. I told you about this. Logan? It was just an inquiry for the mortgage pre-approval. She is twisting it. She turned her glare back to me. Stop it. You are exhausting him. Look at him. You are making him physically ill with your paranoia. I did not argue. I reached onto the hallway table where I had placed the file. I picked up the copy of the loan application Dana had found. I placed it on the table between us. It landed with a soft slap. That is not a mortgage inquiry, I said. That is a high-interest personal loan from a predatory lender, and that is not your signature. Logan. But the contact number belongs to Brielle. Logan stared at the paper. He did not touch it. He just stared at the ink. I saw the gears turning in his mind, grinding against the rust of his denial. He looked at the signature. He looked at Brielle. Brielle, he said, his voice trembling. You said we were just looking at rates. Brielle's face hardened. The mask of the polite daughter-in-law evaporated. She realized she was losing the narrative. She stepped in close to him, grabbing his face with both hands, forcing him to look at her. She is lying. Logan. She doctored it. Can't you see? She will do anything to keep you here. Under her thumb. She paused, breathing hard. You have to choose, right now. It is her or me. If you walk out of this house with me, we are a team. If you stay and listen to this garbage, we are done. The silence stretched. It was agonizing. I wanted to scream, but I held my breath. Logan looked at me. Then he looked at Brielle. He pulled his head back slightly from her hands. I need a minute, he whispered. I just need to read this. Just give me some time. It was not a victory, but it was a crack in the dam. Brielle's eyes narrowed. She saw the hesitation. She saw the danger. She reached into his jacket pocket and snatched his car keys before he could react. No, she hissed. I am not letting you stay here to be brainwashed. I am deciding for you. She turned and marched out the door into the rain. I am getting in the car. You are coming now, or you are walking back to the city. Logan stood there for a second, paralyzed. He looked at the loan application one last time. Then, driven by habit and fear, he turned and followed her. Logan, I said. He did not stop. The door slammed shut. I watched through the window as he got into the passenger seat. They drove away. But I knew something had changed. He had not defended her. And he had looked at that paper for 3 seconds longer than a man with blind faith would have. I went to the table and picked up the document. It was wet from the spray of rain when the door opened. I wiped it dry. The seed was planted. Now I just had to wait for the rain to make it grow. I stopped calling. I stopped texting. I simply opened a fresh notebook and began to log the silence. I recorded dates, timestamps, and the content of every notification I received. I treated my grief like evidence. I learned that when you are a mother over 50 and your child walks away, the world expects you to wail and plead. I did the opposite. I became a statue. I realized that begging only feeds the power dynamic that Brielle was trying to establish. If I was silent, she could not claim I was harassing them. If I was absent, she could not claim I was controlling them. While I sat in my quiet house, my lawyer, Martin, turned the trust fund into a fortress. We executed an amendment that morning. We raised the age of unconditional disbursement. We added a specific clause regarding financial duress and manipulation, stating that no funds could be released if the beneficiary was cohabiting with anyone who had a judgment for fraud or outstanding debt in excess of $10,000. We also added a requirement for a psychological evaluation and a financial literacy audit before any major withdrawal. This will make you unpopular. Martin told me as I signed the papers. I do not need to be popular, I replied. I need him to be solvent. I proceeded to remove my name from every co-signed obligation I could find. I took my name off his car insurance. I cancelled the secondary card on my gas station account that he had carried since college. I cut every string she could possibly pull. It pained me to do it because I knew Logan would feel the sting of rejection, but I had to ensure that the only resources available to them were the ones they actually owned. 2 days later, the cracks began to show. Brielle sent an email. The subject line was reconciliation. The text was sugary, filled with words like healing and fresh start, but the bottom paragraph was the hook. She wrote that if I wanted to end the tension and secure a front row seat at the ceremony to support Logan. A transfer of $25,000 to cover the catering deposit would be a beautiful gesture of goodwill. I read it twice. She was selling me access to my son. The price of admission was $25,000. I did not reply. I did not type a furious response. I simply clicked forward and sent the email to Martin. It was not a conversation. It was Exhibit B. The next day, a draft of a prenuptial agreement arrived in my inbox. Brielle had sent it, claiming it proved she cared about Logan's protection. I read the legal jargon carefully. On the surface, it seemed to keep their assets separate. But there was a clause buried on page 14. It was a sunset provision. It stated that after 12 months of marriage, all separate property, including future inheritances, would convert to community property to symbolize the full union of their lives. I set the paper down. She did not want to marry him for love. She did not even want to marry him for immediate money. She was locking in a timeline. She just needed to survive 1 year of marriage, and then she would own half of everything his father and I had built. I felt the walls closing in. So I went to see my pastor. I needed to sit in a room with someone who would not judge me for fighting back. I met with my closest friends, women who had known Logan since he was a boy. Am I becoming the toxic mother? I asked them. Am I the villain in this story? You are not the villain, my friend Sarah said, pouring me tea. You are the gatekeeper, and the barbarians are at the gate. That evening, Dana called me. Her voice was low, stripped of its usual professional detachment. Evelyn, she said, I found something disturbing on the dark web monitoring report. Tell me, Brielle has been in contact with a service out of Nevada. They market themselves as a credit repair agency, but that is a polite term. They specialize in creating synthetic identities. They mix real social security numbers with fake names to build fresh credit profiles. Why would she need that? I asked, though I already feared the answer. Because she has burned her own name, Dana said. She is looking for a clean host, and she has Logan's social security number, Evelyn. If she uses his data to build a new profile, she could rack up hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that will technically belong to him. But he won't see it on his regular credit report until the collectors come knocking. I gripped the phone. She is not just stealing his money, I whispered. She is stealing his name. We are running out of time, Dana said. She is preparing to vanish into his identity. There were only 9 days remaining until the wedding. It was scheduled to take place in a supposedly rustic event garden in Evanston, Illinois. I did not have an invitation on my refrigerator, but I had the entire itinerary memorized. I knew the caterers were arriving at 2 p.m. I knew the ceremony began at 5. I knew these things because knowledge is the only control you have when you are locked out of the room. I sat in my study with Dana. The room was silent, except for the hum of her hard drive. She had been tracking the flow of money from Logan's remaining accessible accounts, the ones I could not legally freeze, because they were solely in his name. She is smart, Dana said, adjusting her glasses. She isn't draining him in large chunks that would trigger a bank call. She is bleeding him dry in drops. Dana turned the monitor so I could see. There was a cascade of small transfers. $200, $350, $190. They were listed as miscellaneous expenses, Venmo payments, and generic purchases. They looked like the erratic spending of a young man in love. But Dana highlighted a pattern. Look at the frequency, Dana pointed out. Every Tuesday and Thursday at exactly 10 a.m. And look at this one. She pointed to a transfer of $400 labeled consulting retainer. Who needs a consulting retainer for a wedding? I asked. Exactly, Dana said. She traced the receiving account. It did not belong to a vendor. It did not belong to a planner. It flowed into a business account for a limited liability company registered in Delaware. Dana pulled up the registration documents. The company was formed exactly 7 days after Logan proposed to Brielle. The registered agent was a man named Miles Rudd. I froze. I knew that name. I opened the binder where I kept the printouts of Brielle's social media history. I flipped to a photo from a rooftop party in Chicago 2 years ago. In the background, slightly out of focus, holding a drink and looking at Brielle, was a man. I had noted him before, but dismissed him. Miles Rudd, I said, tapping the face in the photo. She isn't doing this alone. The realization hit me with the weight of a stone. This was not just a gold digger finding a mark. This was a structure. Miles was the architect, and Brielle was the face. Logan was simply the resource they were harvesting. They had built a shell company to siphon his income before he even said, "I do." Get Martin on the phone, I told Dana. We need to send a data preservation notice to the bank and the payment processors immediately. If they smell us coming, they will delete the transaction logs. I want every digital footprint frozen. We spent the afternoon drafting the legal notices. We were not suing yet. We were just ensuring that when we did sue, the evidence would not have vanished into the digital ether. That night, my phone buzzed. It was past midnight. The number on the screen was unfamiliar. It was a burner number, or perhaps a friend's phone. I answered, but I did not speak. I waited. Mom. The voice was cracked, barely a whisper. Mom? Can I see you alone? It was Logan. He sounded like he was speaking from inside a closet. The desperation in his voice was thick enough to touch. Where I asked, I did not ask why. I did not ask how. There is a coffee shop near the train station in Evanston. He stammered. I can get away for an hour before the rehearsal dinner. Please. Don't tell her. When the morning of the wedding, he said. 8 o'clock. Please. I don't know who else to call. I will be there. I said, You come? I will listen. I hung up the phone. I did not feel joy. I felt the cold focus of a soldier cleaning a rifle. I placed the phone on the table like a weapon. The trap was set, but for the first time, my son was trying to crawl out of it. I arrived at the coffee shop at 7:55 in the morning. Logan was already there. He sat in the furthest corner booth. His body angled away from the door, as if he expected an ambush. He looked like a ghost of the son I knew. His face was gaunt, his skin grey under the fluorescent lights. I noticed a red, angry welt circling his wrist, the kind of mark left by a watch strap pulled too tight, or perhaps a hand that had squeezed and refused to let go. I sat down opposite him. Dana slid into the seat beside me, placing a thin file folder on the table. Mom, Logan said. He did not look at me. He looked at his hands. We are here. Logan, I said. He took a breath that shuddered in his chest. I don't have the banking apps on my phone anymore. Brielle. She said she would manage the vendor payments because I kept forgetting the due dates. She said it was better if she handled the stress. She changed the passwords so I wouldn't accidentally mess up the transfers. Dana opened the folder. She did not speak with sympathy. She spoke with doubt. She laid the transaction summary in front of him. It is not just vendor payments. Logan, Dana said. It is not just vendor payments. Logan, Dana said. Look at the consulting fees. Look at the credit card payoffs. Every time you get a paycheck, 40% of it moves to an account she controls within 2 hours. Logan stared at the spreadsheet. He traced the lines with a trembling finger. Then he dropped his head into his hands. I signed them. He whispered. Signed what I asked. Papers, he said, his voice muffled by his palms. Last week. She brought me a stack of contracts for the florist, the venue, the caterer. She said they just needed a signature on the bottom line to lock in the rates. I didn't read them. I just signed. I trusted her. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. He had likely signed powers of attorney or loan guarantees disguised as wedding contracts. Then we stop it, I said. We cancel the wedding. We freeze everything. Logan looked up. His eyes were red, filled with a terror I had never seen in him. I can't, he said. Mom, if I call this off, I lose everything. She told me she has insurance. She said she would destroy us. Destroy us how I asked. She has texts, Logan said. She took messages you sent me months ago. About the trust fund, about the money. She edited them. She cut parts out and pasted them together. It looks like you are blackmailing me. It looks like you are demanding I pay you to attend the wedding. She said if I leave her, she will post them everywhere. She will send them to my firm. She will ruin your reputation and mine. I sat back. I realized then that this was the final wall of her prison. It was not just about stealing money. It was about weaponizing honor. She knew Logan's greatest fear was not poverty. It was shame. Dana leaned forward. That is defamation, Logan, and it is a crime. But we can only fight it if you stop giving her ammunition. You have to cut the access. Now. You cannot go to that venue. I added. If you walk down that aisle, you are sealing the warrant for your own destruction. Logan looked at the phone sitting on the table. It buzzed. A message from Brielle. He flinched. She tracks my location, he said. Then we turn it off, Dana said. Logan looked at me. For the first time in months, I saw him really look at me. He saw the mother who had caught him when he fell off his bike, the mother who had buried his father, the mother who had prepared in silence while he was drowning. He picked up the phone. His hand shook violently, but he unlocked the screen. He did not open Brielle's message. Instead, he opened the contacts. Who are you calling? I asked. Mr. Klein, Logan said. He pressed the call button and held the phone to his ear. I watched him take a breath. Mr. Klein, Logan said, his voice cracking. This is Logan. I am with my mother. I need to know how to get out. Please tell me there is a legal way out. Logan left the coffee shop with his phone vibrating violently in his hand. It was a continuous, angry buzz that did not stop. He looked at the screen, his face pale. Brielle was calling. The text messages were stacking up on his lock screen, visible even from where I sat. Transfer the money immediately. The venue is holding the deposit. Do you want to humiliate me? He did not answer. He simply walked out into the rain, heading toward his apartment to salvage what he could of his life before the explosion. 40 minutes later, Logan stood on my front porch. He was soaked to the bone, dragging a single suitcase behind him like a refugee fleeing a war zone. He did not say hello. He walked into the foyer and collapsed onto the bench. He held up his phone. His hands were shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. "I went back to get my clothes," Logan said, his voice sounding hollow. Her laptop was open on the kitchen island. She must have forgotten to close it when she rushed out to find me. He swiped the screen of his phone, showing me a photo he had taken of Brielle's laptop. It was an email draft addressed to Miles Rudd. The timestamp was from that morning. I read the words, and a chill went down my spine that had nothing to do with the weather. "Just get the marriage license signed. We can drain the accounts after the honeymoon." "There is more," Logan whispered. He swiped to the next photo. It was a picture of a file directory on her desktop. Among the folders for wedding and vendors, there was a folder titled in all capital letters, Evelyn. I opened it. "Mom," Logan said, looking up at me with tears in his eyes. "It wasn't just photos. She has scans of your old will. She has your social security number. She has the deed to this house. I don't know how she got them." I stared at the image. The realization was absolute. This was not just about controlling a husband. This was a long-term acquisition strategy. Brielle intended to consume 2 generations of assets. She was not just marrying a man. She was acquiring a portfolio. She was going to take everything, Logan said. "Not just from me. From you," before I could answer. Tires screeched in the driveway. It was fast, aggressive. I looked out the window. Brielle's car was crookedly parked on my lawn, leaving deep ruts in the grass. She had arrived less than 10 minutes after Logan. She had tracked his phone. "Stay here," I told Logan. I opened the front door. Brielle marched up the steps. She was not wearing her wedding dress, but she was dressed in white. Her hair was perfect, but her face was twisted into a mask of pure fury. "Logan," she shouted, trying to push past me. "Get in the car. We are leaving. Now." "He is not going anywhere," I said, blocking the doorway. Brielle stopped. She looked at me, and then she looked past me to where Logan sat on the bench. In the span of 30 seconds, I watched her cycle through her entire arsenal. "Baby, please," she said, her voice dropping to a tearful wobble. I was so worried. "Why are you doing this? I love you. We can fix this." Logan did not move. He did not look up. When the tears did not work, the steel came out. "You are making a mistake." "Logan," she snapped. "You will regret this for the rest of your life. Do you think she cares about you? She just wants to control you." Then, she turned her eyes to me. The mask fell away completely. There was no charm left, only the cold, hard stare of a predator who has been interrupted while eating. "You think you won," she hissed. "You think you are clever because you hid some money." I reached into my pocket and tapped the screen of my phone. I had installed the recording app Martin had recommended. It was running. "You just admitted you tracked his location to my house," I said, my voice steady. "And my son just saw the folder on your computer. You have my social security number and my property deeds. That is identity theft. Brielle, that is a felony." Brielle laughed. It was a sharp, brittle sound. I was organizing his future inheritance. That is what a good wife does. I was helping him. "You were stealing," I said. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. She lowered her voice, assuming Logan could not hear us over the rain. "I am going to marry him. Evelyn. And there is nothing you can do to stop it. I have the venue. I have the vendors. And I have the pressure." She leaned in, her eyes manic. "I just need you to sign one signature on the trust release and it is done." "Is that so hard?" I saw movement behind me. Logan stood up. He walked to the door. He looked at Brielle, and for the first time, he did not look like a boy. He looked like a man who had just woken up in a burning building. "I heard you," Logan said. Brielle froze. She looked at him, her mouth opening slightly. But no words came out. The sound of her own sentence hung in the air like the echo of a gunshot. She had asked for the signature, not the husband. And that was the end of it. I opened the binder labeled The Silent Plan. It sat on the hallway table, heavy with the weight of facts. I had spent weeks compiling it. But in that moment, it felt like a shield. I had already emailed digital copies to Martin, and my calendar was set to deliver the physical duplicates to the district attorney's fraud unit at 10 that morning. I did not need anger. I did not need tears. I only needed procedure. Logan stood next to me. He picked up the pen I had left on the credenza. His hand was steady enough. He signed the affidavit confirming that his accounts had been accessed without authorization. He signed the consent form agreeing to surrender his laptop, his passwords, and his banking history to the investigators. With those signatures, he stopped being a confused fiancé and became the primary witness in a criminal case. Then, Brielle's phone buzzed on the table where she had forgotten it in her rage. The screen lit up. I was close enough to see the notification. It was a message from Miles Rudd. The text was short, brutal, and illuminated in the gloom of the hallway. "Handle the mother. Do not let her report." I did not snatch the phone. I did not scream. I simply looked at Brielle. Put the phone on the table. "Brielle," I said, my voice low. "If you want to talk like an adult, put it down and step back." She looked at me with a sneer, her arrogance still blinding her to the cliff edge she was standing on. She was so confident in her ability to manipulate the narrative that she tossed the phone onto the wood. It landed face up. Logan looked down. He read the words. He looked at the timestamp. Then he looked at Brielle. The last remnant of the illusion finally shattered. He did not look heartbroken anymore. He looked horrified. "You don't love me," Logan said. His voice was quiet, but it filled the room. "You are hunting." That broke her. The controls snapped. Brielle exploded. She did not deny it. She justified it. "I need that marriage certificate," she yelled, her face twisting into something ugly and desperate. "I need the spousal status to open the credit line. Do you think I want to live in this boring suburb? I needed your signature to validate the contracts. You are nothing but a signature to me. I needed to block your mother so I could breathe." Every word was a shovel digging her own hole. She admitted the fraud. She admitted the coercion. I did not speak. I caught Logan's eye and nodded. Logan pulled his own phone from his pocket. He did not look at her. He dialed the number Martin had given us for the fraud task force. "I would like to report an active identity theft and financial fraud," Logan said into the receiver, his voice clear. "And I am currently being threatened in my mother's home." When the patrol car arrived 10 minutes later, the rain was still falling. Brielle tried to pivot. She rushed to the officer, pointing a shaking finger at me. She claimed I was holding her hostage. She claimed I was senile, but I walked to the table. I handed the officer the binder. I showed him the timeline of the transfers. I showed him the forged loan application. And finally, I played the recording of her voice saying, "I just need you to sign one signature on the trust release, and it is done." The officer looked at the evidence. He looked at Brielle, whose face had gone the color of ash. Then he looked at Logan. "Is this true?" Sir, the officer asked. Are you pressing charges? Logan stepped forward. He handed over his phone and his keys to the officer as evidence. He looked at Brielle one last time. There was no love left in his eyes, only the exhaustion of a man who had survived a crash. Yes, Logan said. From now on, you don't get to speak for me anymore. He turned his back on her. The officer asked Brielle to step outside. The wedding was dead. The silence had done its work. I had saved my son with the truth, not with tears. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below to share your thoughts and connect with our community. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the channel Grandma's Family Diary, like the video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more people.